Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, April 5th. So I'm about halfway through 2 weeks of oddness as far as my schedule, and everything seems to be going pretty well on that non-YouTube stuff. But yeah, certainly that does mean that there's a need to make these streams a little bit shorter. Although there's probably a desire on my part and my fandom part, whatever small fandom I do have, to make these streams a little bit shorter anyways. Of course, there is inherently this lack of desire and counter desire by Twitch and YouTube, who would just want constant streams of super long watch time. We're getting new solo modes. And it looks like the tryout duel has started, so we have at least something slightly different to do today. Yeah. So, on the catch-up section, I'm still not really accomplishing much, because, well, everything that I'd like to do is getting broken up. It's just like, here's just a couple hours at most that you're going to have to do one thing, and then you're going to get interrupted, and then, yeah. And I obviously am realizing in myself that I don't have a lot of coping mechanisms or skills around being interrupted. I don't think most people do, but also I'll admit that that is probably a symptom of ADD and ADHD. Interesting. Apparently I didn't log in yesterday, so here we are getting a second day login, or the date just rolled over, which maybe it did. But yeah, being interrupted halfway through doesn't allow for a lot of productivity. So mostly all I'm still doing is just playing on my Steam Deck, and yeah, it is there aren't even any loaner decks. So you just are playing this. In this event, which Nibiru the Primal Being is added to the starting hand, details can be found in the event details on the right side of the screen. Now, let's look at the right side of the screen. Is there something that says, quote, event details? No, there is not. There's something that says event info, which is, I imagine, what they are talking about, but boy, does that just highlight how Konami really is not spending enough attention to the English translation of this stuff, and just not really caring enough about a game that really should be one of their main sellers. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel for Konami should be the equivalent of, like, Elder Scrolls Online, or Overwatch 1 when it was big, or even the Fortnite of Konami. It should be the thing that they're putting a lot more attention and a lot more polish on, and it just doesn't seem like they are. Although at a certain level, maybe they are correct in that there's just not going to be more than a certain plateau of people who want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Regardless of how much polish you put on it. Yeah, I don't even think I have too much to say. I finally got around to starting to work on some of those projects that I realized I needed to do first, and then very quickly did not actually do first. One of which is the idea of entombing applications, a phrase I've made up, which means you just uninstall the application but leave an icon shortcut that will reinstall the application next time you click on it, then run it automatically. The reason you would do that is, even at 512 gigabytes, there's a lot of applications on desktop mode on Steam that would benefit from being highlighted as install this, try this, or you tried this and you use it once a month and you're willing to just download and reinstall it, even though that might wear down your NVMe a little bit. There's perhaps a even larger reason to go with that idea too, on the Steam Deck in particular. Let's see. So I guess what I needed to do on that case was not go so crazy on that, but whatever. I kind of saw that coming. If anything, playing this deck will just convince everybody to play this on the first attempt. And it just doesn't matter. So yeah, I started to work more in earnest on the entombing script. I was running into a lot of problems just trying to figure out how you would integrate that with KDE Plasma, and I really couldn't find the right answer. It seems to me like there's either 1, 2, or 3 correct ways, or there is no right way to do it. I've put some suggestions, and I'm still reading the suggestions of other things that the Steam Deck could be improved, things that either Valve themselves would directly have to do, or I'm just not willing to actually try and spend the extra effort to. I did put one suggestion there that is kind of wrong in which way you would run the script. So there's room for a tweak there. But I need to remind myself personally to make an effort to have a signature on any post that is just asking people to be respectful, because the feature request forum on Steam, first of all, it doesn't seem like it's really being read or moderated. It doesn't feel like it is. There definitely is room for just an automatic response saying, hey, somebody at Valve has actually read this, and we have put it into our process of feature requests. We have an internal system, a bug tracker type system, feature request type system, and we've added this as a concept. Or we'd like more information, or we are at least acknowledging that we saw it. Otherwise, it does feel like it is just shouting into the void. Although, in fairness, I have just more recently embraced the idea of shouting into the void with ideas, and just hoping that maybe 10 years from now, maybe a decade from now, that people will see that post and think and act on it. Maybe it will just be a seed that eventually grows into a mighty oak, or maybe people will just give me a good comment or feedback to make it a better idea. Unfortunately, what I've run into is that I've had two, I assume, different people, but that is kind of a big assumption on the internet. You pretty much could assume that there is, at any point, just a bunch of sock puppet accounts being run by other people. that, in fairness, have the freedom of speech and can say they don't like an idea, but that they really are just bothering and wasting their time posting kind of negative comments or dumb comments for no good reason. And that is my typical experience, is that you either get nothing or you get somebody who is highly opinionated and also highly negative while contributing nothing at all. One of the persons that commented on the feedback was definitely a lot more negative, while the other person was maybe just a little bit more stupid, in my opinion, and that's the wrong way to respond to it. Because one of the comments was, "This isn't a Valve thing. Fix. You need to submit it to KDE Plasma." And then I asked, "Why do you think this needs to go to KDE Plasma when I'm talking about the touchscreen and hardware and the drivers that Valve exclusively makes on their exclusively controlled version of Steam OS?" Like, and as soon as I asked that feedback, they got a lot more rude, justifying their negativity when really they had no need to respond. And I think that's a big problem on the internet in general. Is just, if you don't have anything anything nice to say or anything that really contribute at all, you shouldn't just post. And particularly on Steam forums, it's not like you're getting Reddit karma. Reddit in particular, I think, made that whole situation a lot worse by gamifying the idea of saying the popular thing and getting maybe zingers, might be the right word, on people and trashing on people, or just buying into groupthink as much as possible. But certainly forums kind of always sucked, even well before Reddit. In contrast to that negative experience, is that I would classify them both as negative experiences because people aren't really following things. I think perhaps on the Steam forum in particular, you're just not talking to people who are into the idea, who have experienced the good parts, at least, that you can occasionally get of open source software or just collaborative efforts in general. One of the flaws, certainly, with the Steam Deck suggested features forum and Steam's forums in general, is there isn't just an upvote or a bump feature. So you get a lot of people who will simply comment +1, and that just makes the comments that actually say something else get drowned out, and you get a lot of people that say the exact same thing because they don't want to just comment +1, and that further drowns out anybody that has anything of substance, any real meat on their comments. Definitely any forum should have that feature. Now, but yeah, I started to say, in contrast to that negative experiences, I had an idea for taking a physical standard or making a new physical standard for micro SD cards. It could work certainly for mini SD cards and regular sized SD cards too, effectively flipping two of them on top of each other back to back so the metal pins are pointing outward, and putting that in one physical package. This would allow existing backward compatibility with a plastic spacer, or with having two micro SD cards that could be read in parallel. That way you can move files much more easier without having to have well, in most cases, you're going to need to either plug in a phone into a computer and a micro SD card into a computer to move data between three things if you want to move things from one micro SD to another. Or you plug in a micro SD, move a file over to your internal memory on a phone, then you unplug that and then plug in the other. A lot of people I know aren't really moving files around anymore, but that's really assuming that the people who aren't moving files around are probably also the people that don't have micro SD cards in the first place. So this idea of a back-to-back configuration, what I was calling double XP, I mean not double XP, double micro SD, would be to have two devices of existing micro SDs, or even better, a new standard that it would be one twice as thick, so 2mm roughly. One twice as thick micro SD card. Now, what's the advantage of having a twice as thick micro SD card standard now that would be a new standard that would only work with things that would account for that? Well, the advantage of that, pretty obviously, is that now you have 4 to 8 extra pins in a double micro SD card that can communicate in parallel with the existing 4 to 8 pins. They at one point added some more pins, and I might be wrong on the numbers, but yeah. So you could theoretically, oh, I did not mean to run that. That was dumb. So yeah, you theoretically could get even more bandwidth and faster speeds. Physically, you also could make slightly cheaper micro SD cards because you just now have more space. So anyways, I thought that was the beginnings of a good idea. It's also not a particularly complicated idea. If anything, I would imagine somebody has already thought of that idea. Anyways, so I found a very generic help email, contact us email for the SD Card Foundation, which is a conglomeration of several bigger name companies. And I sent off that email just because, once again, this is the idea of shouting in the void, not wasting a bunch of time, not doing something in this case that I couldn't possibly do anyways. Yep. So yeah, I sent out that email. I know I'm stopping and starting here, sorry. And very quickly I got you're not read, your email was deleted without being read response, which press X to doubt on that one. Like, why would you not read an email? And the only thing you could assume there is that they read the title and the headline of it and then decide to delete it, not read, or they are just inherently not reading any emails at all. And then I got a much more automated, we have received your email like a couple minutes later, which yeah. So even if they were trying to just do something that I imagine lawyers may have told them to do, which is to say, we never received this, we never read this, if we make something like this in the future, we refuse to to be sued for stealing somebody else's idea. Not that I was going to do that in any way, nor do I think my idea is really that unique that it really could be patented or copyrighted. But who knows these days what you could actually get a patent on. Seems like you can almost get a patent on anything. But I guess that is also a quick and easy rejection, and puts an end to that. Inherently, there is a frustration that I have, and I think a lot of tech people and programmers have, in that there's just a lot of nonsense and a lot of antisocialness. And I would say even in myself, that gets encouraged because of all the just antisocial nature of everybody else in the world. Is that if you run into what is more than 50% of the time negativity, yeah, you as a programmer may want to just lock into your own little world and make your own programs and not really collaborate or talk or deal with other people. Notch in particular basically had those kinds of feelings when making Minecraft, and Minecraft was supposed to be this small indie project that he was just doing a lot for himself, I imagine, and it just grew and grew and grew until he's all of a sudden a celebrity and probably getting a lot of feature requests and a lot of positive and negative feedback and just being put in the spotlight, which programmers typically not comfortable being put in the spotlight. I installed Thunderbird on the Steam Deck just to see how that looked, and I think Thunderbird has definitely evolved a lot since the last time I used it, which was probably 2 decades plus ago. And weirdly, it still doesn't really integrate greatly with Gmail. You can do it, even with the new 2-factor OAuth configurations, but you then also need to go to Google Contacts and export your address book, and then you need to import it, and it's not really recognizing the address book perfectly. There's like a checkbox when you import it that you should uncheck. That's checked by default. And yeah, it is just extremely questionable whether you would really want to use Thunderbird and have an email client at all, when you can just go through Chrome to Gmail web interfaces and probably get things a lot quicker and easier. The only reason you would want Thunderbird is if you just want to get notifications every second you get an email, if you're up and down emails, and I don't know how many people really are doing that. It's going to heavily depend on just your lifestyle, who you're communicating with, and what kind of job infrastructure you have. There are chat functions, but they're kind of like internet relay chat functions for Thunderbird to do more of that. But the cell phones have just replaced everything, really. And it is an incredibly small minority of people that could use the Steam Deck without having a cell phone and without having a lot of the functionalities and applications just by default being your main client, your main program you use to get emails, SMS, take phone calls, things like that. Even video chatting, I imagine a lot of that is going to be through cell phones, which does just leave the desktop mode of the Steam Deck feeling like an also-ran. Let's see, can't do that one, so we'll do this. I guess we'll do this. And we can't have 5 summons. So what I think I want to do is see if we can figure out. I already clicked the wrong thing, so we'll just do this. Yeah, I really don't think I have too much to even talk about today as far as the Steam Deck goes, because I really don't think I have accomplished much or done much. Otherwise, I've been spending a lot of time just working on that entombing script, and for the most part it's driving me crazy because I'm doing regular expressions to search for specific lines of text, and regular expressions are always the bane of my existence. What I'm doing should be working. Online testers say it should be working, and yet in a bash script, in a sh file, it's just not really working. I don't see the point of him doing that, but whatever. Oh, I guess the point of doing that was to have that happen. So I should have activated this, because now he's just going to activate that. And then we're going to be destroying each other. Yeah, so the regular expressions are driving me mad simply because they're just not working. They should be working, but they're not working. And that, I don't know what to really do there. It's a lot of what I dislike about debugging, where it's like, do I add a question mark here, or a single quote, or am I missing a number 1 when it should be a number 2 or a number 0? Like, yeah, and I'm not really some of the lines of code, which it's not really that much of the lines of code, it's barely 15 lines, are working in ways that I don't know why it's working that way. I should be getting from a grep command, which is search and return 1 line of code, should be getting from that 1 long line of code, and at some point it is just automatically breaking it up by the spaces and turning it into several smaller sections of code, which I didn't ask it to do that. So my understanding of this system and the delimiter that they seem to be adding, and the separation and splitting that they're doing by default, is lackluster. On the good side though, at least I did put a band-aid patch on the fact that when the Steam Deck loads in the desktop mode, the Steam client takes so much resources, and it still takes a bunch of resources to leave it running, but you kind of have to. I was able to make a splash screen run and continue there. It's not perfect by any means, but it does seem like it's going to work as a way of just making the desktop mode look like it takes a lot longer to load, because it actually does take a lot longer to load because of the Steam client. If it weren't for the Steam client, yes, the desktop would be usable and bootable in just a couple seconds. Notably, I'm still in a position where I really haven't played any games on it, and just now, over a week later, I'm starting to feel like the X button is finally wearing itself down enough so it's reducing the amount of times it's getting stuck. But it is a very poor experience, and that is definitely something physically that I think Valve should adjust for, is that they should either figure out if their buttons are loosey-goosey, figure out a way to make them a lot more loose to start with, so the buttons don't get stuck for such an incredibly amount of time. Or just pre-wear the buttons in a testing mode. Just have a robot that is going to press every single button up and down 1,000 times to wear it out, and just make sure the buttons are still working after that. Particularly the X button is a major problem there. If I was playing other games, I might very quickly find that the Y and A button also are getting stuck, but I'm pressing the X button way more often than anything else to bring up the menu. I mean the keyboard, not the menu. Well, we're not winning here. Is it because I'm getting unlucky, or is it because I'm playing a poor strategy? Probably poor strategy. Alright. But yeah, if I'm saying I have nothing to talk about and there's really nothing else to go around. I did manage on the Steam Deck, I guess this is one thing I can say, to show it off to somebody else who was fairly impressed with it. Perhaps I got a little bit annoying trying to show everything off to them, but yeah. Inherently, though, my enthusiasm at the moment is probably way higher than what any random person, even a gamer in particular, a heavy gamer, would have enthusiasm for it. And I definitely do feel that I am very much like a YouTuber who's just hyping up, who's legitimately hyped, and thus potentially overhyped compared to where the real feeling is. Right now there is a Steam Deck dock that's on sale, 2 of them actually. I don't think I'll buy them right now because I'm still debating in my mind whether I would want just a dock always attached to the back of the Steam Deck. It definitely feels like there's just room to always have that attached. I also looked at Adafruit to see if there was anything that would have been thin enough to have a USB-C connected device on it to plug into the USB-C port. And there isn't anything really built right now, but I definitely could see, if the Steam Deck got popular enough in the makerspace, that there's room to have like a couple of buttons that would just plug into the USB-C port. So you could maybe turn the brightness up and down or something, just custom buttons there. But there is still that weirdness that there's only one USB-C port, so without a hub that you can put power through, whatever you plug into the Steam Deck, you're going to have to constantly unplug to charge up the Steam Deck. It's just going to need that kind of battery. It's a bit of a shame it doesn't have wireless charging, but I can also certainly see where wireless charging would be fairly useless. In most cases it would be too slow unless you have a really brand new like standard, the QI2 Key 2 standard would have to be included with the magnetic things. I could see with the way the Steam Deck case is, you could put a wireless charger right in it and use that as an advantage to to wirelessly charge while having the Steam Deck sit in your case. But yeah, you really don't want wireless charging. Most people wouldn't use it. And you still would need the docking, so unless you can get a lot of other things to wirelessly work, that's where you run into problems, is you really would want wireless audio, wireless video. You'd want to be able to put it in a dock that would just give it power, and then or just not even dock it at all, and then wirelessly connect to a TV or to a surround sound system and just work that way. And those are definitely lower level things that might actually be physical things. But yeah, there definitely is a case that there needs to be a second USB-C port, either on the other side of the top of the Steam Deck, on the bottom center of the Steam Deck, or even at worst case scenario right next to where the current USB-C thing is, which would be internally the wiring way you would do that. But yeah, having a second USB-C so something could stay plugged into it makes a lot of sense. Because you really do just open up the scenario where if you were doing a teleconference and had to plug in a webcam, there aren't really any Bluetooth wireless webcams that I know of that would easily be designed to use with a Steam Deck. If you're in the middle of a teleconference and your battery goes low, you have absolutely no solution there to solve that problem. You can turn down the brightness, and that's about it, to try and stretch it for a few seconds. So inherently, because of that, if you want to use a teleconference and do a webcam or anything, you probably need a hub, always. And that just comes off as fairly silly. And it really, I think, goes to show how the Steam Deck was definitely being looked at as this is just going to be a video game console, and we're never expecting to even have any wired accessories as an option. You know what, I could have probably put Nibiru into the graveyard then used this to counter Nibiru's effect. Although maybe it wouldn't have worked that way. But yeah, that's about the only physical thing. There's a couple smaller things that I still feel like need some work on, as far as there probably should be holes for a lanyard. There probably should be a way to Visa mount the back. There probably should be some better thoughts on even cooling. It would be nice if there was a second micro SD card slot. Certainly. There is perhaps a thought about a fingerprint scanner. Although inherently for Linux and for Steam OS and Steam, not sure that there would really be that much support for something like that. It is an interesting thought, perhaps, that with the Steam Deck in particular, maybe Steam could implement a fingerprint scanner. I'm not sure anybody would feel particularly comfortable with that idea, though. To have a fingerprint scanner log you in to different accounts on Steam. Yeah, so that probably would be an extra unnecessary thing. You could get ridiculous and you could suggest like projectors being built into it. Short throw, low lumen projector built into the top of the Steam Deck so you could project to a wall. HDMI out as its own separate thing probably doesn't make any sense in modern times. I definitely want a second USB connection first before I add HDMI out, and HDMI in via HDMI or USB-C is not really necessary. Swappable batteries back, yeah, might make a lot of sense. If there was a secondary battery pack that you could swap around to get the amount of life up. There's probably room for an experimentation there as far as just how many battery how many battery packs would actually give enough power fast enough if you were currently gaming to move the needle, or would it be a case where a lot of battery packs are just being drained as fast as you are playing them, and it's only just maintaining the status quo of what your battery life was at most. It's a little surprising, particularly on the Steam Deck, which has a lot of extra space compared to practically any other device. But it's a little surprising that there isn't just a retractable headphones holder in any case that I've ever seen. It does make this weird situation where if you had, say, wireless Bluetooth headphones, you're carrying those in your pocket on top of carrying the Steam Deck in a portable case. And if you have wired phones, you're carrying those in your pocket. It just doesn't... It feels like it would make some sense to have some kind of external case that would have come with a free pair of headphones and be retractable. I guess if I do think about it though, adding the splash screen was one project that I did get done quickly. Let's actually count my successes here. I made a band-aid fix for that. I made a feature request. Every feature request I made, I have to really count as a success because I accomplished my goal of saying, hey, I'm going to shout into the void and hope that somebody at Valve sometimes at some point sees this. I actually did get printing working for me and posted how you can do that without rooting the operating system. It is a band-aid fix also. These all are. But yeah, I got the splash screen working. I got the rotating of specific applications. If I want to rotate into a portrait mode, I figured out how to do that. So I got that working. So there's 3 projects I really have gotten done in this last week that So then there really is some success there. Of course, as a YouTuber, making YouTube content is my @1 goal, and I really haven't worked on that at all, and won't probably for the next week at least. And at some point in the future, that could just change forever. Everything is potentially possible. But yeah, I didn't play any video games. I also didn't work on my computer. This has been now an extremely long amount of time in which my computer is just sitting around being idle, which I'm keeping it turned on, and I'm still streaming on it, but it really isn't doing anything else. And there's only so much I really can get it to do to try to automate things. I can get it to make YouTube Shorts, I can get it to schedule YouTube Shorts, those are working, but my macro as far as opening up news is broken. The making of clips didn't work today, so I'll have to work on that. And so that there is room for programming on my computer, which I'm not really willing to do. And I kind of want to just wrap everything up with the Steam Deck. But then inherently I also have to shift what I do with the Steam Deck around and actually start playing some video games on it. And I've spent way too much time this week just watching Sudoku people and playing Sudokus. Like, I've really fallen into that obsession, even though I'm not really capable of making any footage around it because I'm too bad at Sudoku to actually guarantee successes at a high enough rate. And I am very much trying the Sudoku puzzles at the beginning of watching the videos from Cracking the Cryptic and another guy, I think he's called Sudoku Sleuth now, so I've expanded even more there. Which is fine because at least that's more video game related than what I've been doing in the past, which a lot of what I've been watching on YouTube has just been the same old like podcast type audio. But yeah, I've been spending way too much time there, and I haven't spent any thought getting back to Hand of Fate 2. And I really haven't spent any time scheduling videos, which is another thing I should do. So, you know, once I get all the programming down as much as I would like it, I need to shift what I'm doing with the Steam Deck down to just playing video games. Meanwhile, I'm also dropping the ball on Memento Mori, which is a game I don't want to drop the ball on. It took me a lot longer than I thought it would when the shift up game Destiny Child stopped service and you just couldn't play the game anymore. I added 4 mobile games. One was Star Trek Lower Decks based game. One was Tinkafuma, a explicitly adult game. One was Memento Mori, an idle anime gacha game that's not really even much of a gacha game because they don't add that many characters. It's very much a slow play gacha game. And then the other was 7 Mortal Sins, Ecstasy, not to be confused with 7 Deadly Sins, the anime. And very quickly I was overwhelmed with 7 Mortal Sins, Ecstasy, and uninstalled that. And then it took me months to finally just give up on Star Trek Lower Decks and uninstall that. So now I'm down to 2 games and I'm still dropping the ball on just doing all the daily quests. Part of that is because I made 2 accounts on Memento Mori, and so effectively that is 3 games at that level. I think this will be our last game. We're not going to get major all 3 successes. It would have been nice to get 3 wins here, but it's not going to happen. So let's start talking about the video game news. Apparently, Final Fantasy XIV's Xbox chat censorship is happening. Which I don't know what really is being censored here. I would think this would be Flame Private Second Cloud would be what I... Oh no, it's not Cloud, it's Class. That makes more sense. So it's like Flame Private Second Class, and then ASS is a bad word, so it's doing a very poor job here of censorship. Really. There's a much better way to do that, certainly. But you can be far too loose on bad word censorship, but then and let people sneak things in, but this is way too strict. Inherently, class is a actual dictionary word, so it should be very easy to recognize that if a bad word is part of a larger dictionary word, the larger dictionary word should be allowed. Notably, lass, L-A-S-S, should be allowed, which would also mean that class, C-L-A-S, should be allowed. Let's see, Censored Gaming has several things here today. Yasumi Matsuno's thoughts on video games translations and localization. Matsuno is the director and writer of Final Fantasy Tactics, among other things. Let's see if we can get the full post here. It's a little long. This is my personal opinion, but I will share it with you. I believe that it is unacceptable for someone to alter the work without considering the author's intent. However, when the market or language is different, a direct translation may not convey the intended meaning accurately. This is especially true for humor. Therefore, I think some degree of alteration is unavoidable. The issue lies in whether the original author has consented to these alterations. Has anyone confirmed whether the author of Unicorn Overlord has approved its English translation? In any case, I think both arguments have merit, translating faithfully to the original and allowing some degree of adaptation. I encourage discussion on this matter as I do not intend to take sides. However, if the original author approves, I believe that should be respected. That's all. Which sounds like a fairly fair opinion to have. And for the most part, I would say I don't think I've heard of a lot of people that really get any real traction with the idea that localization to preserve the humorous intent is unnecessary or bad. Like, there are definitely in the anime scene the subs versus dubs argument, where subtitles often were more literally translated in a lot of cases, and dubs tended to be more localized. And fan dubs or fan subs often are argued to be more accurate. A lot of times it feels like it is just a matter of opinion, and it probably is. Part of the problem certainly is that the Japanese language is very subtle, so even amongst Japanese people the meaning can sometimes be argued on some statements. The biggest complaints, and perhaps there is a danger in thinking this way or too many articles this way, is that The problem is not tiny changes. It is giant, huge changes where the intent has been completely thrown out of the window and they've just added content that has no point in being there at all and no right to be there at all. Localizers and translators have done that on many occasions, or they have intentionally incorrectly translated things. Often, almost always, this is for some SJW reasoning that just doesn't make sense. Honestly, at a certain point, if the argument might be better to just translate things more literally and then say Japanese be racist, y'all, that may just be, or Japanese be sexist, y'all, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of classic books where the author's intent in the words they put in there had overtones of racism and sexism and homophobia and things like that. In any other form of art, nobody would legitimately allow for those books to be that changed. We could certainly take that to an extreme of just like the Bible. If somebody tried to rewrite the Bible to be less sexist and less racist, then it would be a very, very different book. But yeah, in video games it somehow gets allowed. And my main concern here, and the point I was trying to make, was if the SJWs and who seem like they have gained a lot of control in localization and a lot of influence over foreign game developers, particularly Japanese game developers, if they can get gamers in general to talk about small translations and just go, oh, well, let's debate these small translations, then they're getting gamers in general to take their eyes off the ball and stop focusing on the big translations, which is definitely a way of manipulating and propagandizing people, is to just say, worry about this small thing over here and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain about the big things that are happening. Which, the bigger things should be more controversial. Now, I don't think I have an article for this, but there seems to be somebody who has made a website specifically designed around filing complaints and how to file complaints to certain governments when certain video game companies take games offline. In particular, this started from the idea that the game The Crew is going to be shut down, an online racing game, and France is willing to listen to complaints from anybody around the world, whereas most countries, I think, would limit complaints and comments to actual citizens. So, I don't even know the name of this website, but it does seem like there might be an actual movement here to have a website that will just direct people to the right places. One assumes and hopes it is directing people to the right places and not just the wrong places. And certainly I doubt the governments are going to care much about it, but who knows? They get enough comments. I could see France in particular maybe not being very happy with Ubisoft and using a bunch of complaints as an excuse to go after Ubisoft. On the other hand, here the Outlast trials have been suddenly removed from the PlayStation Store in Saudi Arabia and buyers can no longer play it. So we now have the second instance now where Sony has been very willing to revoke people's abilities to actually play games or demos. First it was the Stellar Blade demo that leaked early. Now we have in Saudi Arabia the Outlast trials being removed. This certainly does not inspire confidence and should not inspire confidence in buying a PlayStation, a new PlayStation, or being a part of that storefront. Sony is exclusively really the only company that has done this in recent memory of taking a game down completely from being playable. And the concern I definitely would have here is if there's not enough of an outcry around this, if there is not a noticeable drop in sales for games and hardware, then Nintendo and Microsoft almost certainly will agree to the same terms, and be really annoying if Steam started doing that also, where all of a sudden you're buying games and you can no longer play it. I would assume in this case the Outlast Trials was either gory and violent and should have never been approved to be played in Saudi Arabia in the first place, or possibly you do see what looks like a female presenting character here. Maybe they don't like that the female has a job, or the female's maybe not completely covered in all situations. It may have nothing to do with any of that, though. It may also just be that there's some kind of chat in Saudi Arabia, and people in Saudi Arabia were using the chat to say something that the Saudi Arabian government didn't like. Let's see if this picture actually shows us where this Nintendo localization job for Nintendo of America requires an awareness of culturalization and DE&I, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where? Yeah, it would be under description of duties, I would think. And the text is really small here. Blah 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 blah. It's not actually listed on this picture. So, pretty terrible screenshot for Censored Gaming to make, in that it doesn't actually show the picture. Maybe if we clicked on this, we would get an actual picture of the highlighted part. Nope. Just comments. In fairness, for a job listing, being aware of culturalization and diversity, equity, and inclusion is really a requirement, even if you don't agree with them. Like, you need to be aware of those things. But I guess also, inherently, this is probably coded language to say that you need to agree with them, because you wouldn't inherently get the job at all if you were not aware of culturalization and DEI. And again, I warn about just making the phrase DEI and the concepts of diversity, equality, and inclusion the boogeyman, and something that people should just hate and say, no, we should never have diversity or equality or inclusion. That is not the direction that people should go, in my opinion. It is a matter of how it's being implemented and how it's actually being accomplished. I actually would love to see more diversity, equality, and inclusion, particularly amongst the employees at Nintendo of America. And that probably won't influence too much as far as how games get made, since it's really Nintendo of Japan that's making all the games. But it would be better just for the employment status of people. And that's kind of true for the entire gaming industry. There's still a lot of at least middle class rich white males that are hired and working in the video game industry. Of course, then you run into problems where you have companies that are boasting about being 100% African American companies, and it's like, well, okay, so now you've just brought back segregation at that point, and now you're just segregating yourself and being racist against anyone who's not black, as far as your hiring practice. The arguments for integration in particular, I think, have been forgotten quite a bit in later generations. But yeah, you don't really achieve diversity by having 100% white males or 100% Africans in your company or 100% Asians in your company. Anyways, I think I've ranted about that one enough for today. Since we're trying to go short, let's move on. Unfortunately, these topics just keep coming up over and over and over again, and it's not really my intent to bring them up. It's just that it keeps getting talked about, which makes it annoying, certainly, because there are a lot of other topics that are certainly being forgotten about and not being talked about, like, hey, video games are too expensive, and there's too many microtransactions in them, and video games are not being made particularly on a decent budget, and they're running over budget, and they're too expensive to develop. And video games aren't very diverse in the type of gameplay mechanics that they have. So we're seeing a lot of games that are first-person shooters, and we're still seeing way too many games that are just kind of copying each other. The fact that there's 2 quadruple A or triple A pirate games that are out at the same time is kind of ridiculous, considering neither one of them are really that popular. Too many sequels are getting made and have been made for decades. Let's see. Moving on. Video Games Chronicle says that the Saber Interactive founder says everyone seems to like to pick on Embracer. Matthew Karch believes his former employer has been harshly criticized for recent downsizing. I don't think they've been harshly criticized, but I will certainly see that there are a lot of other companies that deserve to be criticized as much, if not more. Embracer's situation from the outside looking in definitely feels more financially treacherous than, say, Microsoft's situation, where Microsoft has laid off a lot of people too, and they have less of a justification for doing that, since they seem to be making actual money. Embracer's release of actual games has been particularly low and not particularly profitable, so it's not surprising that they needed to lay off people. Of course, who can you blame other than Embracer for Embracer's mistakes? In every single situation, the way the people at the top, the CEO, the manager, ran their business was on this speculative, we're going to get inflows of cash from investors style of running a business, instead of running a business as on a much more realistic style of running a business, which is to say we're going to make a product and grow based on the profits of that product. Embracer effectively has been run like a cryptocurrency based company, where there's just this major speculation that people will invest in anything that has cryptocurrency in the name, back in the day when cryptocurrency was hot, and that they never really needed to focus on having an actual product or making sure people actually would buy that product. On the other hand, we could scroll down this whole article and read it, or we could just take it for what it is and skip it, which is, this is somebody in the video game industry defending somebody else in the video game industry, and they probably have no extra knowledge than anyone else. This may very well just be a case where this guy is friendly with that guy, and thus they are covering. And it's hard to make an argument that there is a level of criticism that's too harsh right now as far as any video game company is concerned. Yes, there are some crazy people out there who make death threats and say crazy things, but legitimate criticism is fairly low around the video game industry. There should be a lot more. And unfortunately, a lot of topics you really do have to just be like Bernie Sanders and talk about the same subject over and over again and just repeat it over and over again, which is what politicians used to do quite a bit to finally get enough people to pay attention to certain topics. And the overinflated nature, the over budget nature of video games is definitely something that needs to be talked about over and over again, and the poor management of video game companies is something that needs to be talked a lot more about. Moving on, the first Gears of War 6 news is going to reportedly be coming this summer. Multiple reporters are claiming that the first information on the next entry is set to be revealed. I don't feel like this guy is going to play a major role in Gears of War 6, because I don't think this guy played a major role in Gears of War 5. Although at a certain level it probably makes sense to just bring back, I think his name was Marcus Phoenix. But yeah, you've got Jeff Grubb verifying something that was said on the Kind of Funny Xcast, which was the host Paris Lilly making a prediction. Unfortunately, I know nothing about Paris Lilly, but I do know Jeff Grubb, and his willingness to repeat rumors or confirm or verify rumors is too high, and his accuracy is frankly too low. It's also very much just not actionable. Something called Gears of War 6 may be started to teased in the summer. Okay. Well, what do you do about that? You probably won't even have a wishlist page to wishlist it. If anything, you as a gamer could just catch up to play any Gears of War games you haven't played at this point, which if you played 5, I'm not sure you really would be in the right mindset to then want to really play 6, because I would suspect that either they're going to double down on the lack of on a more focusing on different main characters than this guy, and double down on the more open world sections of 5, or move the story further and further away from what the first games were. Gears of War as a series in particular has a problem in that it is definitely a early Xbox game that was made for gamer bros, and it's just now in 2024 not really palatable to make a gamer bro hyper masculine game. There probably is enough room to do it anyways, but I could see there being a lot of complaints from both sides. Regardless, if you make it quote unquote woke, then people will be complained, and then if you make it quote unquote based and it's just hyper masculine alpha guys, then people are going to complain. So you're going to have to be in the mushy middle to some extent, and that probably means your game is just going to not feel that interesting. And that's before we even see one bit of information. There are problems with the Gears of War series. What they could probably do is reboot the series, and that might help them a little bit or buy them some time. Remaster Gears of War 1, 2, and 3 to start with. Reboot the series, and then have it more in that direction. Yeah. But yeah, this is not actually helpful information until you actually see a true announcement. Just talking about rumors. It has been a slow week, which has been helpful, certainly, since since I don't have a lot of extra time right now. But this is too slow of a week. This certainly also highlights just the problem with journalism, online journalism in general, is that there is just this push to justify editors' jobs by forcing them to have a certain number of news articles be published, when news really should be reported on when it actually happens. And if you just had a slow news day, that was less of a problem back when you were printing paper and printing out newspapers. There is also just a lack of evergreen content that you would have for newspapers, for online stuff, video game reporting in particular. But yeah, it leads to a lot more gossip columns and nonsense, which is not helpful, particularly in the digital age when people have a lot more better things they can do with their time. Newspapers inherently succeeded in previous decades because you didn't have a cell phone in your hand, or a TV or radio or anything else to do with your time, so you would literally be bored to tears if you were sitting around. So you would grab a newspaper and pretend to read it. But that's just not the world we live in anymore. And that's for regular news, real news, not video game news. Let's see. Pinball FX put out a trailer. I watched this. It's a Universal Studios based pinball tables that they're making, using the licenses of Knight Rider, Xena, and the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, which seems like a odd combination. First of all, because I wouldn't have really assumed that any of these were actually owned by Universal Pictures or Universal Studios, and also because I just feel like they might be getting the best deals they can get for licenses that they probably don't care about. It is weird to make a Xena pinball table when I don't believe there is a Hercules pinball table. I would argue maybe the Australian actress who played Xena, is maybe a little bit less controversial at the moment than Kevin Sorbo, but almost would make sense to still bring in a Hercules table. Although maybe Xena actually, in the long run, did become more popular. It's weird to do the Battlestar Galactica reboot pinball because the Battlestar Galactica reboot has totally been abandoned. And I don't know what you could do to reboot it or continue it in any way. It would be practically the same thing, unless you went in a completely different direction or something like that. The way Battlestar Galactica reboot ended doesn't really leave an opening to have a Star Trek The Next Generation experience, and that is probably a major mistake that they made, is that they should have left an opening where there could have been a Star Trek Next Generation. And at least you did see that in the Stargate series, is that even the last spin-off of several spin-offs from Stargate SG-1 left it open to potentially still have more sequels. And weirdly, they've dropped the ball on that and instead want to reboot the movie, which might be a way of starting the whole series, but I really do think Stargate as a movie can only sell so many tickets, whereas you could get a lot more with a new Stargate TV series. And then weirdly, Knight Rider, the talking car kit, I mean, it's barely a license at all. You could just have made a talking car parody pinball table. Pinball FX, I think in part, might have been owned by Embracer Group, so they may be taking some licensing here to make some money on their own. Zen Studios, I think, may have been owned by Embracer and then got bought out by a different group, if I'm recalling correctly, a couple weeks ago. So, yeah. There's a lot of improvement that could be done to Pinball FX to make pinball fans happier, and it's not really happening. Let's see. Then we have a Video Games Chronicle article here saying that the Ninja Theory co-founder, Taming Antoniadis, I assume, has left the studio. The Hellblade writer-director is no longer with the Xbox developer. Xbox, at some point, I think, acquired Ninja Theory. This would be certainly the time to leave, as Hellblade 2 is almost certainly completely done. But yeah, also, that doesn't spell a great outcome for Ninja Theory, although Ninja Theory doing Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, and Hellblade 2 is a very different Ninja Theory from what I would have liked to really see from them. And it is kind of crazy that Microsoft can't get Heavenly Sword to be remastered and come to PC or Xbox. It was a PlayStation exclusive. Enslaved Odyssey to the West failed, so no real surprise there. And DMC Devil May Cry is probably the rebooted Devil May Cry that the Japanese people who actually own Devil May Cry don't care about. So, yeah. As far as I know, even Enslaved Odyssey to the West may have been a PlayStation exclusive, as console exclusive. So it may be a case that each of these were funded in part by other publishers, and the publishers still own the rights to each of these games, leaving only the Hellblade series to actually be in the hands of Microsoft and Ninja Theory. Being the writer-director of Hellblade 1, though, that's the only game I've played recently. It definitely felt like they were trying to do a lot of cinematic Dutch angles with the camera and do some way more cinematic directing in Hellblade 1. The writing in Hellblade 1, I think, is pretty weak. And I really feel like Hellblade 1 was overhyped. So, if you are now in this catch-22, at least I am, from my opinions on Hellblade 1, and certainly the game itself is really simplistic and short. You are in this situation where, if I really enjoyed Hellblade 2, which I probably will play Hellblade 2 at some point, I'm not super hyped around doing it anytime soon, but if I enjoyed the writing and directing there, well then there's a problem, because the writer-director is no longer with that company, thus he's going to go and move on to make something else, which would be alright if I did enjoy that, because him doing something else probably would be more in my wheelhouse, instead of just making a third Hellblade game. But then also, if I actually hate the writer and director, the writing and direction of Hellblade 2, well, then I hate the writing and directing of Hellblade 2, and so I have a negative experience, and you're just left with a question mark about who would be doing the writing and directing for the next Team Ninja game. But noticeably, when I think Team Ninja, the parts I enjoy around not Team Ninja, I'm confusing the companies. There's a company called Team Ninja, and there's then Ninja Theory. When I think Ninja Theory, I think of the interesting fast-paced button mashing of Heavenly Sword, and the interesting platforming of Enslaved Odyssey of the West, and the fast-paced combo fighting of DMC Devil May Cry. There's nothing like that in Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. It is a slow-paced, walk-around kind of puzzle game, limited small puzzles. It is in such sharp contrast from everything they've done before. So I'm leaning more towards the good riddance opinion, frankly, seeing this guy leave, because I do think he probably wants to make a movie, and I think he might do very well in making a movie, but I think his ambition and passion around taking what was very much like a cinematic experience and forcing it into a video game format was a mistake and led to a poor quality game. I would also argue from a general perspective that one of the things that Hellblade sold itself particularly well on is that it was doing a lot of face scanning and high level graphics. As graphics have now gotten a generation better, they probably can't keep up on it, and it's just not going to be a major selling point to have a very pretty game with very little gameplay. Anyways, moving on. Let's see. Following up on that, you also have Hellblade 2 Studios Ninja Theory. I guess the studio in general thinks its fans enjoy shorter, focused games. And there's a certain level I can agree with that, but also I feel like if any video game company makes that argument, they're probably just excusing the fact that their game is going to be way too short. I felt like Hellblade 1 was too short, really. And I would like to see that Hellblade 2 be 2 to 3 times as long as the first game. And them saying that the digital only version only costs $50 is not really taking into consideration inflation, deflation, and just the fact that there's $50 is still a lot of money. If they were selling a game for like half price, $30, $35 even, it becomes a better argument that way. But yep. Shorter, more focused games are something that I would want to see more gamers embrace, but also I just know that most gamers have been raised on grinding and they expect a little bit of grinding. You could certainly make an argument around something like Fallout, that there's a game that could have been split in half. Fallout 3 is a great example of that, and have more focus, less RPG grinding than that. But then you think of you think of things that just feel a little too short, and Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is kind of an example of that. It's a little too short. It could have had some grinding in it, a little bit more grinding in it, just to give you more gameplay. And inherently, I always think of it as on the scale of falling action and rising action, that roughly every 30 minutes you want to have some rising action towards a fight, and then after 30 minutes you want some falling action where you're maybe doing some slower platforming or puzzle solving, something like that. And if you're making like an exclusive puzzle game, it's much more difficult there than to have rising action and falling action, but you want to try and go with that. But it is much more trying to be on that cycle that I think makes a more enjoyable game than it is to have a specific amount of hours. A 10-hour game done very well is just as valid to me as a 20-hour, 30-hour, 40-hour, 100-hour, 200-hour game. A lot of those RPG games that are too grindy, though, feel like they are they are shifting the scale to the point where there is really never a memorable rising action section. Even when you're fighting bosses, it feels too much like fighting regular low-level minions in a lot of RPG games. Moving on. Let's see, the Roblox CEO, I think, said this, that Roblox is, quote, the biggest gift to teen devs, not exploitation, says the studio head. Roblox in particular has been accused of exploiting kids and teen developers, mostly because they are exploiting teen devs in that they've created a system in particular to have teen developers or developers in general in Roblox get paid in a company script in Roblox coins, effectively, for selling their mini games that they're making, of which you can never cash them out, but you can buy Roblox coins. And there's a lawsuit around this, and the judges have already started to crack down on this. And so yeah, this is an article not likely even worth reading because I am at least personally biased against Roblox. And in fairness, as best as I can be fair, there's just really no way you're going to create a system like this and not create exploitation, particularly in the case of having a game that's targeting people underage. But this is just not something that you can actually accomplish. You would be better off going for years and just not monetizing any of it, running ads on other people's creations and keeping all the money for yourself, that instead of adding the air that you could actually earn in-game currency that can never be cashed out. From a programmer's stance, I'm more insulted by the idea that these kids are just being encouraged to believe that they actually would become a video game developer by making Roblox minigames. You'd have to be really young, 8 or 9 in my book, that I would allow somebody to say, oh yeah, I'm making games in Roblox. That's about as old as I would allow somebody to say that before I'm going to have to smack them down to reality and say, you're not really making games. You're using the wrong engine. You're building something, script kidding it. If you want to make games, you need to learn C++ and C#, maybe even Rust. At the very least, you need to start learning how to program in Python and actually be a programmer if you're going to be a programmer. Unless you're doing something artistically, then you need to be using other software like Photoshop to draw paintings or Blender to do 3D animations. Unless you're making audio, then you need to be using something like Audacity to make audio. But to try and lock developers into thinking they're accomplishing something, whether it's RPG Maker or Roblox or whatever, is just incredibly disingenuous and not going to help anybody actually take the proper steps needed to become a developer if that's what they really want to be. Let's see. Here's the Outlast Trials video. I'm not going to sit here and watch it all though. At some point, all my ad blocking stuff also stopped working. Probably just turned it off. GameDeveloper.com says a mobile Star Wars game, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, is coming to PC. Which we generally don't get news articles like this from GameDeveloper.com. You are probably going to be in a weird position, certainly trying to play a mobile game, on PC and actually enjoy it. You can see the graphics here are pretty rough, a little low polygon. You also run into a real problem here in that out of the picture, out of the picture, out of the picture, out of the picture, probably out of the picture, out of the picture. I don't even know who that is. And yeah, out of the picture. This is very much movies 1 through 6 as far as Star Wars people are concerned, and the cartoons. And that creates a weird situation where what Star Wars is now being sold as does not include basically anybody that you would recognize if you were an adult who saw Star Wars in theaters. And I just question how much Ahsoka here will really play a part in the new generation of Star Wars movies and series and things, and how much you can really just milk things like Boba Fett. The most recent one they announced was Star Wars The Acolyte with a trailer. On the other hand, maybe that works particularly well because maybe this is the characters people actually remember and care about. But you're not going to knock anybody's socks off with this kind of low polygon graphics. You'd have to remaster the whole game, and the game Galaxy of Heroes would have to be fun in the first place, which I'm not sure it really is. So yeah, I guess we'll have to wait till it comes out for me to get any more information or make a deeper opinion on it. Atari has nabbed Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 rights for $7 million, which who owned it before? Frontier Developments? The company currently manages the Roller Coaster Tycoon franchise under a long-term licensing agreement with the series creator Chris Sawyer, and is currently working to develop new titles and expand it. Interesting. So you have one of these rare occasions where the actual creator of a game owns the rights to it, and now the new Atari company that has nothing to do with previous Atari companies has bought the rights. Unfortunately, that doesn't sound great because the current Atari company has not really proven itself interested in just making console or PC games outside of making their own Atari console. I wouldn't be surprised if they got the rights to Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 just so they could make a real world roller coaster in an amusement park in the real world. On the other hand, it's not like anybody else was making Roller Coaster Tycoon games by that name. Plenty of people are making other similar types of games, but nobody was using that name. I don't know what the value of the name really is, though. Probably isn't much more than a small bit of nostalgia, frankly. Moving on, this one was a bit weird. Modern Warfare 3 data miner has uncovered a parkour multiplayer called Get High. It's expected to be released as part of a celebration of cannabis culture. Weird. So you have like a Cheech and Chong character here that apparently either has already been released or might be getting released. This is the kind of thing that I suspect might be totally fake. But then again, I really can't put much past Modern Warfare 3. Anyways, they may be just getting somewhat desperate. The stereotype of gamers being lazy potheads that just sit around and play video games all day, I think is not as insulting as it might once have been. Yes, I imagine there still are a lot of lazy potheads out there. There might be a lot of non-lazy potheads out there that play video games also. But yeah, it's just not going to have that same impact either from the anti-pot people, of which I don't imagine there's much more of them left, and the pro-pot people who are figured out how to be more interested in other things other than just playing a video game because Cheech and Chong is in it. Cheech and Chong themselves are fairly old people now, and so they just are unlikely to have that kind of impact. They were also talking about, now I have an article here where Helldivers apparently gave away a free cape to either all the players or some players, and anybody who's wearing the cape, the player base is now rejecting those players and kicking them from their teams in a level of like role playing, which is dangerously crossing the line between let's have fun together and role play and reject anybody who wears this cape, down to let's harass people who are wearing the cape who may actually want to play the game and wear the cape. It definitely extremely devalues the effort you made to make the cape. Video Games Chronicle says April's, quote, free Amazon Prime gaming titles include Fallout 76 on PC and Xbox, which I thought Fallout 76 was already free, but certainly makes some sense why you would do that with the Fallout games, although giving away Fallout 76 is pretty cheap considering how they're promoting the Fallout TV series. Larry Herb here is apparently going to get back into podcasting, but more recently he started tweeting more often, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago, 4 hours ago, but he's just kind of tweeting almost random tweets that are not particularly well thought out. Sea of Thieves gonna have 250 trophies when it arrives on PlayStation 5 on April 30th. That is video game related. Here's somebody else left Xbox. He's commenting on that. But yeah, April 30 says, hey y'all, I need your help as I get ready to return to podcasting. I put together this poll to see what areas of interest you would make for interesting topics. So let's click on that and see where he's thinking he wants to talk about. Let's see. Okay, this is some kind of podcaster, Microsoft 360. What format, both video and audio? Depends on what you're talking about. So this is an odd question to make number one. Is you're gonna have a lot of people saying both video and audio. To start yet. So rate your interest here. Current game releases, interview with gaming developers, personal tech, phones, watches, etc., smart home tech, autos, other nerd stuff, Bitcoin, home servers, etc., pop culture, music, movies, and memes, interviews with non-gaming people of interest, science stuff, space, global, forget gaming, focus on other technology topics. So he does seem to have a bias that he wants to not talk about video games, but also, very noticeably, doing a poll like this, he has no passion at all. So whatever podcast he's doing, he's just doing because he's going to try and monetize his name somewhat. Like, if you had a passion, you would not be asking people, what should you talk about? As a content creator myself, yes, I have a passion about talking about video games. If I just wanted to get views, I would have made a bunch of how-to videos and succeeded a lot better. Or I would have followed memes and chased the meta and inherently I would have succeeded talking about things I didn't really care about until I finally burnt out, and then wouldn't have gone anywhere. Let's see. And then the third questions here are, how often would you like to receive a new podcast? And how would you like to experience them? Do it live, normal audio only, video podcasts. So yeah, he basically has no clue as to what he wants to talk about, and so he is going to just be not particularly interesting unless he gets a bunch of other people with him and then they were interesting. And in fairness, last time I really paid attention to the Xbox podcasts, it didn't feel like he was really that interested or interesting anyways, and that he was just letting the other co-hosts take up the majority of the time speaking. YouTube Gaming wants to remind us that The Elder Scrolls Online released 10 years ago today, notably. If this is accurate, which I'm not 100% sure it is, Bethesda, Xbox, not saying anything about that at all, not promoting it. The Tales Principle 2 in the Tales franchise is right now deeply discounted for a Steam weekend deal promotion. Different kind of art we're seeing here from the Tales Principle franchise. Tales Principle 2 is 40% off. Tales Principle and Road to Gehenna DLC for Tales Principle are 90% off. Which, yeah, has a great time. I would say to buy at least the first game and try it out. Video Games Chronicle says that online play for the Wii U and 3DS is going to be shut down on Monday. Players are still able to play games offline and download update data. It will be almost certainly a very short amount of time before update data and maybe playing offline can't be shut down and won't be shut down, but I wouldn't be surprised if update data servers go down also. Yeah. Inherently, I think you are definitely crossing a line here, and they probably have already pretty much crossed the line as far as perseverance or preservation, not perseverance, of video games, where I don't think even Nintendo would have cared if you had ripped the ROMs and emulated Wii U games years ago. They pretty much didn't care, I think, by the time this Switch launched. And the 2DS games are probably going to be the better games that you would really want to emulate and play. Hardware sales to maintain and repair these things are going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible at this point. It does kind of feel like this is a growing trend, though, where the support for old game consoles is getting worse when it really should be getting better. Now this is interesting. Having not really paid attention to the Wii U, seems like at some point they made a version, or they made a mock version of a Wii U with a camera on it. Oh no, there's a camera there too. I think that's probably in part hurt their sales too. It's just having a camera on the device seems like a really bad move, but noticeably there was also, I think, a camera on the 3DS. There definitely is not a camera on the Nintendo Switch, and I think that's intentional. Now, honestly, I feel like that's the right move, is to just not have cameras on devices by default. Make them an accessory that can be added later. We already talked about this comment. Microsoft has launched an Xbox Spring Sale, a little late for spring, but okay, offering of savings up to 50%. which I assume this is not really including physical hardware. And certainly with Game Pass, it's a lot more difficult to get hyped around video games on Xbox being on sale. Certainly with Steam sales being better. Discounts for over 1,000 products, which compared to Steam is a very, very small number of products that could be on sale. Steam summer sale easily could have 10,000, 100,000, even maybe 1 million games on sale at some level. Apparently Stellar Blade is going to receive a new game plus and free skins as DLC. The developer Shiftoff also says that the PS5 game won't include any microtransactions at release, which is a bit of a good thing to say considering how Destiny Child, Shiftoff's first game, and Nikke Goddess of Victory are very much heavy mobile gacha games with microtransactions. So there was a slight concern that would be the case, is that there would be a bunch of microtransactions in Stellar Blade and that it would try to be a mobile game on a PS5. And it may still very well try to be more of a mobile game with microtransactions in the longer run. But if you can play the entirety of the experience without any microtransactions, that severely limits what kind of microtransactions you could add to the game post-release. You would pretty much assume, though, that they would have just said no microtransactions, period. If they had already completely determined they would never add microtransactions, although there have been some companies that have said no microtransactions and then added microtransactions later, and that's caused some controversy, so perhaps limiting your statement is a smart move. Definitely are getting a lot of news and a lot of talk about Stellar Blade, which I think is really highlighting how there is room for success still for smaller companies. If they're given a chance, if they do something different, if they just have different kinds of graphics or different appearance or different attitudes on things and aren't just doing the same old first-person military shooter game over and over again. On the other hand, you look at the two pirate games and there's a lot of talk about them also, and yet I still don't feel very enthusiastic about it, so to each their own. Square Enix is reportedly reassigned a top Dragon Quest producer following delays. Yui Miyake will now lead the company's mobile games. Wouldn't be surprised. We've been seeing definitely some shuffling of management at Square Enix, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it still very much is a case where Square Enix is just always unhappy with how games do. Mobile Dragon Quest games in particular, there's probably too many of them and they probably aren't that interesting. And I would tend to want to see just one annualized good AAA Dragon Quest games and not a bunch of spin-offs that don't really matter. Relic has announced layoffs following its split from Sega. It says the cuts will give it the best possible chance to survive in an increasingly volatile industry. I would argue the video game industry is probably not that volatile. It is just a case that the industry has gotten together and decided that they want to lay off as many people right now while they can get away with it so that they can hire other people at lower wages. This may very much be in part an industry-wide attempt at union busting, as we're starting to see actual unions form in the video game industry. And frankly, that's the one thing that would kind of push me into thinking about entering the video game industry if I was ever actually going to try and do that. It definitely changes the terms quite a bit if all of a sudden I know here's an established union and it's a union shop. So if I go and work at a place, I would have extra protections against the union from just being laid off and fired. Of course, they have to get to that point, and unions are not at that point yet. Right now, we're seeing a lot of layoffs. Now would be the worst time to enter the video game industry. And certainly, it still would make a lot more sense if you're a programmer to just program for a bank or for any other kind of company in any other industry, and then program video games as a hobby. You'll get paid more, you'll work less, you'll have more job stability. You'll probably have better benefits too. Let's see, we already talked about how Ninja Theory's co-founder Tamim Antonitis has left the Xbox studio. Vlamebeer co-founder Jan William Najam has become the sole owner of the indie studio. I feel like I've seen this logo, but I don't think I've heard anything else from it. This new news means the Dutch studio could be set for a mini revival, with Najam pledging to release Ultra Bugs and supporting existing projects. It never makes sense for there to be co-founders or co-owners. But yeah, as far as Blamebeer, Ridiculous Fishing EX is the only name of a game they're really mentioning. But yeah, it always gets into a messy situation when you don't have a single person in charge owning a company, particularly video game companies, because you need a single artistic vision to some extent coming from the top, from the owners. But yeah, in most companies it doesn't make a lot of sense to have co-founders, co-owners. Everybody starts their businesses being buddy-buddy, and then very quickly, once you start working with people, you realize you're not family, and you're not buddies, and you never really can be family or buddies. So you have to have just a, at best, professional, respectful relationship, and at worst, you have downright resentment to your co-workers, your co-founders. This isn't so much video game news as much as it is just Roku is increasingly seeming like it wants to suck more. But Video Games Chronicle says that Roku wants to patent the ability to display ads when consoles are connected to its TV or paused. The patent will check HDMI devices for inactivity and override the signal to run ads on your TV. Yeah. It doesn't matter if this patent actually happened or not. It sucks that this idea was even spoken into the existence. Roku has increasingly gotten worse and worse as a product and wanted to shove just more and more ads in front of people where they really aren't doing anything as far as new features or new support. So I definitely can't recommend Roku as an operating system anymore. I would recommend a Chromecast, in part because you can install random unknown sources for Chromecast and make it do other kinds of Android apps. That your mileage will vary wildly as to whether the apps actually work. But at the very least, Chromecast, being run by Google, just has Google showing you ads. It is very much important to also recognize that you don't want for your network speed a Roku in your house. It is constantly calling home and sending in data, and if you block it, it just keeps on trying to send that data over and over again. When I look at my logs of block tracking stuff, it is 98% Roku trying to send data, maybe 1% Netflix trying to send data and track you. It is very much not concerned with your privacy or respecting the amount of bandwidth you have. And this is coming from somebody who really liked Roku TVs originally as a concept. Now I'm at the point where I would be kind of happy to replace my Roku TVs with other TVs, just regular TVs with no operating system, and then plugging a Chromecast into them. But also, that would be too expensive to actually do. You could never connect your Roku TV to the internet and then put a Chromecast in it, but instead, even that's kind of expensive. And I don't think any customer is going to find this helpful or be happy about the idea that you pause a video game maybe for a second and then it starts showing you an ad. An ad, it by all means, if anybody earns the right to show you an ad, it would be the content creators who are giving you some level of entertainment. So if it was anybody that deserved to show you an ad when you pause a video game, it would be the video game developers, the companies, the publishers. But you're also paying for those video games, so they won't have ads in them, and we have firmly already rejected the idea of having ads in $60, $70 games we're buying. Perhaps if the Xbox gave you free Game Pass credit for watching ads, it might make some sense there in that case, but you are getting absolutely nothing if Roku accomplishes what they want to accomplish here. And that's part of the problem with Roku in general, is that they are giving you absolutely nothing and increasingly adding ads. They also forced everybody to accept their new arbitration terms and then write a letter to the lawyers if you want to opt out later. Otherwise, you could not use your TV anymore. Yeah, Roku is almost certainly going to be sued, and rightfully so, in the next year or two for their terrible business practices. Which is crazy, because they should just have a really good name, and they should be the de facto smart TVs to buy if you're buying a cheap TV. And it's just not happening because of their own decisions and their own actions. And then Ubisoft has appointed a publishing vice president named Brenda Panagrossi as general manager for the US markets. Panagrossi has been with Ubisoft for 22 years and is now in charge of its market plans in the United States. This is a GameDeveloper.com inside baseball type article that's helpful to get the information, but not particularly very actionable information, because there really is not too much to do with that. So let's go through all the games that I'm going to make YouTube shorts on from the last stream. Yeah, and then we'll start going through games that maybe I will make YouTube shorts on. Like this Delta Protocol. Yeah, doesn't look particularly interesting. Nope. Nope. See, this would be the point where I'd start talking about the Steam Deck, but I really have burned out of anything new to say there. Overall, there is still a lot I'm dropping the ball on, in that a lot of these services and applications that I'd like to have running on my servers are not running because my servers are not running. So having like Nextcloud and having your own self-hosted Google Drive type application, interesting, mostly negative. Let's see why this is so negative. There's something I would like, but Trying to read the negative reviews here, and they're all so long-winded. Yet another mobile, hyper-monetized, underdeveloped, and unfun autoplay game where if you aren't spending $1,000 or more a month on shop items, you might as well not be playing. Okay, so it's just hugely over-monetized. But yeah, I'm just not doing... I've never found enough time and enough focus to get my servers going. And so having things like a Jellyfin server running or a Plex server is something I should have running, and it's just not something I've done. I often have this thought as far as just I'd like to get things done so that I could enjoy them for the rest of my life, and then the contrast of that is I'd like to have entertainment to enjoy for the rest of my life. In particular, that's like my anime DVD collection, where I haven't watched really any anime in years, maybe an occasional series once a year. And yeah, I have a whole bunch of DVDs, but I actually don't have an upscaling Blu-ray player, which is really what I would like to buy at a cheaper price than less than $300. But also I really just question whether I will ever be in that same mindset that at the age of 50, 60, 70, 80, or 90 I would actually want to sit down and watch anime. I mean, who knows, but that does seem weird to be extremely old and watching anime. On the other hand, there are extremely old people today that watch westerns, and that's what they watched when they were younger. So it's not unbelievable. Yeah, there really is no argument whatsoever that it's a good thing that I haven't got my servers working and running. I just haven't spent the time on it. Instead, I've made a bunch of content, which in fairness, the content I have made has led to more subscribers and more views, and I am going up slowly here. This game's saverless. I was trying to figure out what country this was from, because I saw something about this, but I didn't pay enough attention to remember what was going on there. Definitely has a different art style. Yeah. Yeah, there's something about this game, visually obviously, but there was something else about it as far as the developer, I think, was like maybe Swedish or something. Is best I can guess, and I'm probably wrong. Of course, there's almost certainly in everybody's life a long list of things that they never get around to, never really want to get around to. Things that should be done. The vast majority of that is based on just finances. Yeah, if I was a billionaire, then obviously I would probably just be hiring a lot of people to do a lot of things and getting things done. But Also, everybody ends up leaving something unfinished. And that's not a terrible thing too, because if you're obsessive about finishing everything, you're either not really starting enough projects or you're exerting yourself to way too much of a degree to accomplish things. You're either not challenging yourself with your projects or you're not starting any projects at all. Mostly this used to be a situation that was kind of uniquely the case of books, where everybody secretly would stop reading books quite often or never even start reading books. But most people have given up on that pretense, and it is just a case where people will openly say, yeah, I'm not reading that many books, or I'm not reading any books. And again, a lot has changed now with screens and cell phones, that you could be reading quite a lot in modern times and not actually be reading any narrative books or scientific books or anything. You could just be reading a lot of articles. But yeah, to get back to how that connects to the Steam Deck, there definitely are clients for things like Plex and Jellyfin that make a lot more sense if you can run your own servers, and then those own servers stream music and movies and data instead of filling up micro SD cards or internal memory on a Steam Deck. Anonymous Hacker Simulator. I'll give that a chance. It's probably nothing. We're still seeing a lot of the same old, same old. This one's a little too all over the place visually. Unfortunately, there really is just never going to be a point where we start to see significant higher percentages of good games. All that seems to happen is that as you get deeper and deeper towards Christmas, you start to see just a larger amount of games overall, and so the absolute number of good games goes up, but then the absolute number of negative games also goes up, or garbage games goes up. So the early parts of the years are probably the easier parts of the years as far as curating games, and it's still not really that easy. Certainly as far as not accomplishing things, doing any fall list cleanup is something that definitely I'm not accomplishing anything with. It's definitely a case that I got the Steam Deck thinking I was going to end up sitting in a waiting room for an hour a day, or longer, 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe even 4 hours, and then it did not turn out to be that case, so it just doesn't make a lot of sense to try and do fall list cleanup on the Steam Deck when you're only there for at most 30 minutes. It inherently, I don't think, makes a lot of sense to open a bunch of tabs on the Steam Deck anyways. It is a very powerful system within reason. It is not an extremely powerful system as far as the amount of RAM. It's sharing 16 gigabytes of RAM as far as between his GPU and his CPU. If you start opening a bunch of Steam pages very quickly, you're going to start choking your amount of RAM down to a very uncomfortable amount. Whereas in contrast, I think I have 32 gigabytes of RAM on my computer that are exclusively just for CPU usage. And even at that, I already know that there's a massive amount of it that gets eaten up by Firefox running and opening a bunch of tabs. Alright, so we have our SteamDB 24-hour peak numbers, which I'm starting to think that my chart is pretty much proven to be useless, and I don't know if I want to double down on it and try and make it more useful, or just admit that it was a failed experiment. Counter-Strike 2 still massive numbers, and then we're seeing in 24-hour peaks very high numbers in the 100,000s for the top 15 or so of games. And content warning we can see is in the 23rd spot with 64,451, and that's probably the newest game they really pay attention to. Guess maybe we can ask where Lost Epic is, or Epoch, if it's even on the list anymore, if it's fallen really far down. Palworld, maybe we'll get a boost when it gets some updates. But yeah, SoundPad is really low from what it has been in the past, although that seems kind of reasonable. Belairtro is kind of low. Last Epoch is way down here on the 60th. So there definitely, at most, is a trend that we've been seeing of games falling very low after they get their 15 minutes of fame. Yep. Frontier publisher sales going on Steam. And we really haven't had any talk at the moment around a summer sale. And the new and trending collection of games is its own wild thing where I'm not sure whether you should trust it or not, or whether it's helpful. You could probably trust it as much as you could anything else, but any other list. So let's just quickly see what this publisher sale is all about. Yeah, Planet Zoo, Jurassic Park Evolution 2, Stranded Alien Dawn, Planet Coaster. Yeah. So it's kind of a smaller collection of games, which is true for any publisher sale really see. And then maybe my chart is somewhat useful in that we see Apex Legends falling down here, and Market Blade Point falling down, Helldivers maintaining kind of a low level, Stardew Valley, Palworld coming back up a little bit, and Content Warning seemingly it's fallen way down, which is no surprise considering Content Warning was free originally and then is now selling itself for $7.99. And yeah, I'm kind of glad to see that didn't work. And then this chart is just a mess with different colors, showing way too many different colors. Alright, and so now let's just go through the headlines and See if we can get some new clips and get it to work this time. And see if there's actually any news worth talking about. Because it definitely doesn't feel like there was a lot of news this Friday. Now I do get the weekend off, so maybe I will find some way to accomplish a little bit more on the weekend, but I also wouldn't be surprised if I just keep working on the Steam Deck on the weekend. Anyways, headlines. A new look at Star Wars Outlaws is coming next week. I'm already at a point where I can't keep the Star Wars games separate in my mind. Reminder, online play for Wii U and 3DS will shut down on Monday. Helldivers 2 Democratic Detonation War Bond launches next week. It includes new weapons, armor, capes, and emotes. Microsoft has launched Xbox's Spring Sale, offering savings of up to 50%. Tekken 8's first DLC character is now available for all players to purchase. Stellar Blade will receive New Game Plus and free skins as DLC. Modern Warfare 3's latest free trial is live and includes new Season 3 content. Rare explains Sea of Thieves PS5 cross-progression, friend invites, and exclusive items. I guess if you are excited about Sea of Thieves, then you probably would want to check this out. I like the visuals of Sea of Thieves. There is definitely a chance here that Sea of Thieves may actually be a game that would catch my attention, but then it's a multiplayer focused game, I think. And if that's the case, I still wouldn't play it. Square Enix reportedly reassigns top Dragon Quest producer following delays. Relic announces layoffs following its split from Sega. Roku wants to patent the ability to display ads when consoles connected to its TV are paused. Pinball FX is adding tables based on Knight Rider, Xena, and Battlestar Galactica. Mobile game Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes is getting an enhanced PC port. The game will have support for higher resolutions than 60 frames per second. That doesn't inherently mean that the models are going to be any better, though. And frankly, it looks to me like it is just the generic concept of a RPG, mobile RPG, with Star Wars skins over everything. Modern Warfare 3 Data Miner uncovers a parkour multiplayer map called Get High. Next week's epic free game titles have been revealed. Ghost Runner is going to replace Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice and Thief. I'm still very much having an inability to log in and pass the CAPTCHA on the Epic Game Store. So I can no longer claim any of these games on the Epic Game Store, not that it really matters. Roblox Studio head insists children using it to make money is a gift, not exploitation. I will not repeat my commentary before, just to save time. A non-VR version of C Smash VRS is coming to the PS5 this summer. Now, what's weird about this is that they are promoting this by showing it on the PlayStation Portal, which would just mean it's streaming from the PlayStation 5. Which just definitely does not feel like this is the right way to play what would have been a VR game originally. Seems like that's the absolute worst way to play it. April's quote free Amazon Prime gaming titles include Fallout 76 and on PC and Xbox. The first Gears of War 6 news will reportedly be coming this summer. Final Fantasy VII's Rebirth's impossible Platinum Trophy bug will be fixed in the next patch. Hellblade 2 runs at 30 frames per second with dynamic resolution on the Xbox Series X and S. Yeah. So inherently, this was what I in part said is that I was not very much impressed with the graphics of Hellblade 1 as much as they wanted me to be impressed with it. And now they've to push the graphics. I think their engine is just really bad. They're now running at 30 frames per second with a dynamic resolution, which means they can't even get a consistent 30 frames per second at any resolution. Ninja Theory says the sequel doesn't include graphics modes and frame rate can only be raised on the PC. Yep. And see, that certainly makes it seem like it's not going to be a particularly high quality game, which I wouldn't be surprised. Yep. It definitely feels like if we were to gamble, we should be gambling on Ninja Theory being the next company from Microsoft that has major layoffs, if not being completely shuttered. I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft just tries to completely shutter it, move the employees around to other departments. But they are all based out of, I think, Ireland, so, or that North UK areas somewhere. So if they were going to shutter it, they would just be closing down the office or making it a support studio or something like that if they're not going to completely shut it down. You can't just move them to a different office in a different country. Saber Interactive founder says everyone seems to like to pick on Embracer. There's a free beta key giveaway. Play the adaptation shooter Ascendant this week. Beta will run for 2 days from April 5th. This is a giveaway coming from VideoGamesChronicle.com themselves, which I've never seen them do that before and call that news. New Pal World update introduces the game's first raid boss. No pictures available. Ninja Theory co-founder Tamim Antonides has left the studio. Hellblade 2 studio Ninja Theory thinks its fans enjoy shorter, focused games. Even if that was true, they don't enjoy dynamic resolution and 30 frames per second. The suspect behind a Nintendo Live 2024 threats has reportedly been arrested. Nintendo recently canceled a series of public events in Tokyo over safety concerns. Which, okay. We'll have to wait and see if there's any actual news there or whether this is just rumors and speculation. Hollow Knight Silksong has been raided in South Korea. This implies it is an actual game and it is going to be announced pretty soon. Respawn apologizes for Apex Legends account resets and lost progress issues. Ubisoft confirms a forward event during the Summer Game Fest week. Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone patch notes detail today's Season 3 update. Tekken Boss says younger gamers prefer team games so they can shift responsibility if they lose. New Fallout video goes behind the scenes for Amazon's TV series. A fan-made Bloodborne cart will get a rebranded release in May after Sony made it remove its IP. It'll now be called Nightmare Cart and not include any Bloodborne characters. Neo Sprint, Atari's reboot of the Sprint racing series, is coming to PC and consoles this summer. The hackers who got the PS Portal to run PSP games offline helped Sony to patch out the exploit. Consumers were mostly playing older games in 2023, a report says. A Zelda Tears of the Kingdom clothing range is coming to Uniqlo. Saber Interactive CEO says its Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake is still alive and well. A Nintendo survey asked for feedback on Mario RPG, Paper Mario, and the Mario and Luigi games. Sony is planning a PlayStation showcase next month, it's claimed. Silent Hill could be featured at the event. Bungie will showcase delayed Destiny 2 expansions, The Final Shape, next week. Rockstar has revealed 2 more games coming to its GTA Plus subscription service, Bully and LA Noire. Yellowbrick Games has announced an action-adventure title called Eternal Strands. April's PlayStation Plus Essential games are now available to claim. Right, and so that's some of those were older stories, but since the clips didn't work for the last video, that works particularly good. Which means we just need to go through the Gamatsu articles now. It would be helpful to potentially have something to have a break here in between these, but it definitely wouldn't make a lot of sense to go back and play another game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And play in silence for 40 minutes. Which is about the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. God War series sales have topped 400,000. Front Mission 2 Remake is coming to the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and PC on April 30th. Let's see. Front Mission 2. It's a mech-based RPG game of some sort. Bloomberg says Dragon Quest series executive producer Yu Miyake is to step down. Yusuke Saito is a strong candidate to take over. Yeah, that's very believable since we've already seen other people around Dragon Quest being moved around in management as far as Square Enix, and other people at Square Enix in general being moved around. Seems like changes are definitely happening at Square Enix. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Probably not much will change. Not as much as you would expect. The Legend of Heroes Trails Through the Daybreak 2 is coming to Switch on July 25th in Japan. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance has its second trailer available on Gamatsu. Endless Ocean's Luminous Sounds of Sea trailer is available on Gamatsu. Toybox Inc. trademarks Natsumon 20th Century Summer Kid in English in Japan. Which, that makes me wonder if they perhaps are going to try to make an English Asian release, or if they actually are going to try and bring it to the West. Moving on, I guess. Saga Emerald Beyond details Diva number 5. So, is it the case that in the Scarlet Grey series there are multiple divas? Or is this a case where there's one character named Diva number 5 and everybody else has different types of names? A lot of what Saga looks like is a character collector type game compared to like Shin Megami Tensei, which is also a character collector game, just in slightly different visuals, slightly different styles. Of course, there are a lot of character collector RPG games out there, so shouldn't be really that surprising. I would say, looking at all these characters though, they do feel like they are very inconsistent, in that you have little monsters and you have anime characters, that humanoid anime characters that look one way. Here you have more of a fantasy fighter style. Here you have more of a post-apocalyptic punk style. And it does feel very inconsistent. Crypt of the Necrodancer DLC character Hatsune Miku has been announced. We had rumors about this, but it has now officially been announced. It'll be an interesting question, certainly, to see if that gets any particularly high amount of skill or sales. Hatsune Miku perhaps not as big as she once was. Gameloft announces a 16-player platformer royale called Divine Rush for PC. It is apparently an Epic Games Store exclusive. Kill It With Fire 2 launches in early access for PC on April 16th. I wasn't 100% sure that Kill It With Fire 1 had actually been released. I guess it had. Definitely has its following, so it must have had that release at some point. Sea Smash VRS New Dimension announced for the PlayStation 5. Devolver Digital and Nereal announced a reality TV first-person shooter, The Crush House, for PC. So, are you taking photos in this game, it looks like? Thus, it is a thirst person. You're taking lewd photos of people on a reality TV dating show, it looks like. This feels like the kind of joke concept that you start with a joke concept and then you cram a game into it. But if they can pull it off, that would be interesting, certainly. Feels like there might just be some horror element that it twists into eventually. Microids and Savage Level announce a tactical RPG called Flint Treasure of Oblivion for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. This feels like yet another pirate-themed game. Although, in fairness, this feels closer to what I would expect from a pirate-themed game. Kind of feels like a Diablo 2 type game, which might work. Frankly, if you did make a top-down Diablo-like game with pirates. Famitsu sales from 325 to 331 have been updated on Komatsu. Let's see if we can see winning post taking number 3 position for the Nintendo Switch. Rise of Ronin still number 2 position for the PS5. And then the PS4, the PS5 version winning post taking the number 7 position, and then the PS4 version taking the 15th position and winning post 10 for the PS4. Yeah, I already said that. Where's Princess Peach Showtime? It's still in number 1. I think in Japan we may find that Princess Peach Showtime sells particularly well, and then it may just not sell very well outside of Japan. And then number 30th is a Switch game that called Hayoki Shinkai Yugiroku Taishi Taichi no Dainikai, which I have no idea what that would mean in English. I probably didn't pronounce that anywhere close to being correct. The Switch OLED model is still holding on to the number 1 spot. It's been holding on to the number 1 spot, I think, for probably at least a year now, at least. And so the actual positions between PlayStations and Nintendo's have not really changed. The numbers are barely changing. It's becoming incredibly stagnant. It's still kind of crazy that they're reporting 6 actual sales in Japan of the new 2D SLL. 6 sales, 6 units in all of Japan. That's basically one store. Of course, this never talks about things like the Steam Deck or PCs or PC game sales. But yeah. I imagine we really won't see any change as far as hardware sales until the next Nintendo console gets announced. And then you probably will very quickly see a new Nintendo console in the #1 spot and just a ton of Nintendo games for that new console. That might be slightly different depending on whether it's backward compatible or not. I guess if it was really backward compatible, which one hopes it will be, you may still see a lot of Nintendo Switch games. Inti Creates announces a puzzle game called Puzzmix for the PS4, Switch, and PC. We're seeing a lot of these kinds of games where it's objects getting thrown down into what looks like a Tetris field, but then they are merging together and becoming larger and larger objects. Instead of disappearing like a Tetris game would have them disappear. Disgaea 7 Complete has been announced for the PS4 and 5 and the Switch. Not really sure what wasn't in the original Disgaea 7 game. No. I don't think Disgaea really got a major amount of reception. In fairness, I tried to play one of the Disgaea games and found it too complicated and too grindy, despite its anime style that did catch my eye. Vast majority of the time you're looking at screens like this, doing positional placement RPG games. Grindiness. One thing that's interesting about the art style here, I notice, is that Disgaea 7 Complete here is showing off a lot of the characters, but they have actively chosen to not show one character that was highly prominent in the press material originally. Let's see if we can even get a small image of her. I saw her just being displayed briefly. Maybe she's not as big of a character as in the game. Here she is. So you had this green-haired anime girl that has a belt for just covering her chest, and you saw a lot of her in the promo material for Disgaea 7, and they have opted to go away from that. Which really doesn't change much. You still have an anime girl with a lot of cleavage and hourglass figures, but maybe the belt was just a little too lewd. Trigger Heart Excelia launches April 26th for PC worldwide, May 2nd for the Switch. Neptunia vs. Titan Dogo, first details, opening movie, and screenshots have been released. This was what felt like a April Fool's Day joke, but apparently it's real, in that it's going to have the Neptunia RPG game characters on motorcycles fighting, I guess, these guys. It, to me, seems like you're probably just playing a Neptunia game but moving on motorcycles, which in fairness, any game like the Pokemon game where they introduced Pokemon that were effectively motorcycles might benefit from just faster expected speeds of gameplay. Yeah, just moving from point A to point B. And I don't think that means every game should have a motorcycle in it. I think it means that games should just play faster, and we should introduce the concept of having fast forward buttons in the same way that we can watch YouTube videos at double speed. I think increasingly for grindy games, a fast forward button makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, I think a lot of RPG games in particular are also poorly programmed, so trying to fast forward would probably not work. And the right move is just to make your games faster paced in the first place and not disrespect the player's time as much as a lot of games seem to do. Saga Emerald Beyond Diva number 5 and final trailers are available. I have to assume this is Diva number 5, one of the game's 6 protagonists. Interesting. So there's several protagonists in one game. Some convenience store for Switch launches July 25th. This looks like a visual novel of some sort. Let's see, it was released on Steam in 2000 and is on my wish list. Yeah, I remember seeing this. I don't think I'll make another YouTube short around it though. It is interesting certainly to have something coming out to the Switch though, and on Steam it's tagged as being mature and having sexual content. It definitely still feels like it is a game that you wouldn't expect to see on the Switch. Yeah. It is certainly interesting to ask that question as far as just, do we think perhaps the next Nintendo console might try and crack down and be a little bit more for kids only, or would the next Nintendo console possibly even go in the opposite direction and be even more open? I imagine they probably feel like they're fairly comfortable to just stay where they are, which is to allow a lot of games to be on the eShop, and then as long as it doesn't cause controversy, not really promote or mention them. Which weirdly, the Nintendo Switch's releases, with a lot of Nintendo games being for kids and younger kids, and then a lot of mature games also being allowed, highlights what PlayStation and Microsoft should be, and they aren't, in that both PlayStation and Microsoft are very poor in the field of young kid games. And these are things that you could have said generations ago, frankly, that there should be always this concerted effort to have a few more kids games. There really has never been a point where it felt like you should buy an Xbox for a kid as their first console, or a PlayStation for a kid for their first console. It just doesn't make sense, at least from the PlayStation 3 onward. That they should just have some third-party developers making kids games, and they didn't, and that's why things like Roblox and Fortnite and Minecraft have just been really popular amongst kids. Is because there just really hasn't been a lot of competition there. Anyways, moving on. Soul Cresta Complete Set is now available. Standard Edition and DLC prices have been reduced. It is a shoot 'em up game for $18, $22 if you get the complete set. .2D retro pixel art action adventure game Castaway has been announced for PC. Probably have already made a YouTube short around this, so I'm not gonna make a second one. Although, in fairness, it actually probably doesn't matter if I make a second one, because I should be able to catch that. So I'm gonna actually not go ahead and make a second one and see when I upload and schedule them if I catch duplicates or not. And honestly, it doesn't matter. Even if there was 2 YouTube shorts that were the exact same back to back, the number of people that would see and complain is going to be really, really small. I did hear that somebody apparently got quite a lot of views on YouTube Shorts and made $300 on it. Yeah, there's just like no monetization possibilities at all for YouTube Shorts, which is almost certainly in part why YouTube is promoting them heavily, is because they want to stop paying people for the content they create and instead keep as much money in their own pocket. And then our GameDeveloper.com articles are still broken, so we'll just read the headlines. Dwarf Fortress has topped 800,000 sales in just over a year. Dwarf Fortress is definitely a game that doesn't look interesting to me. One subtle change brought Star Wars Jedi Survivor's dark side moment to life. It's a design article, 6-minute read, they say. We talked about Ubisoft appointing a VP, Brenda Panagrossi, as the general manager for US markets. And then Relic cut 41 jobs after its recent independence from Sega. Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes coming to PC, Roblox, Ninja Theory, Blame Beer. Yeah, we have talked about all of these. This one is, I guess, worth pointing out here, in that Content Warning opened to nearly 205,000 players and netted 6.2 million owners, and now has completely fallen off as soon as it started charging money. And I suspect actually didn't get many sales at all. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this show. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.